I picked up this Bridgeport Mill / Vernon mill. It's a Bridgeport M head on top of a Vernon horizontal mill, also known as a Vernon Sheldon mill for the later models. This one is the earlier one, and it can be readily identified by the single T-slot in the table. The later ones have 3. This only has 1. I believe this was sold with an attachment from Vernon that could have done vertical milling originally. That's not what's on here. It's the Bridgeport instead. I think I prefer that because it has the fine down and rapid down over here. And it's a little bit easier to use than the table itself, like the knee, moving it up and down. Everything on it seems to be in pretty good condition. Got a little bit of backlash, so I know what's wrong here. It's got like 50 thou of backlash. So if we set this to, if I can get it to focus, 0, and get it to kind of lock in. Let's go around again to 0. Don't know if you guys can see that or not. And I move it until I hit resistance again, which is right about there. That's good 40 thou, like 38 thou of backlash. What it is the there's a nut down here that sits on this threaded rod. You probably can't see in this, but there's a threaded rod down there. There's a nut inside of there attached to this right here, and the nut, every time you get to move the rod to move this, slide this back and forth, rocks. It's loose. So I need to take this table off and tighten that nut down or see what's going on there, and it should solve my problem. Right now, this is actually so heavy that I'm afraid to try and take it off by myself. I'm afraid I'm going to damage something, or at least I can't get it back on. And this one has, I believe I counted as like 14 thou of backlash, which is, it's not great, but it's like a 70, 80-year-old machine. I'm not really going to complain too much. It's got some cool features. Obviously, it's a horizontal mill, and it's a vertical mill. The head can actually just rotate out of the way like that. Well, I guess it's like this right now, and then it would be like that. It's got a brown and sharp number 9 taper here, and a brown and sharp number 7 taper here. And I do have the collets for the number 7. And I have some tooling for the number 9, and maybe some collets, I'm not sure. It's got the coolant tray all set up here, and the chip tray also set up for coolant at one time. It doesn't have a coolant pump, but we can fix that. It's got 2 different motors. It's got a 1/2 horsepower motor here, and that runs the M head for the vertical milling. And then it has another big old motor inside of this thing, and I think that's a 1 horsepower motor. It runs the horizontal mill, and it runs the power feed. The power feed's pretty cool. It's activated by hitting this, and it's either disengaged how I just did it, or you can set this little stop here and it will mechanically disengage it by pressing this. So if I bring it on and I hit that, I guess it might actually have to be operating, but that should disengage it. What I'm going to be working on right now is actually trying to wire this thing, and to do that I need a VFD because I have 2-phase power here. I do have 220, but I don't have 3-phase. So the VFD here will convert my single-phase 220, which is this leg 1 and leg 2, into magical 3-phase 220 on the side, and that will plug in to the mill. Just kind of wires are hanging down there. You can see back here it says 220 3-phase. And I'm going to do a bit of a hack job. I'm kind of taking after the seller on this one, and I'm using this extension cord. I'm just going to cut the end of it off, and I'm going to wire it to 220. It's a 120 volt extension cord. However, I should not exceed the installation rating on it, because the way that 120 works in the United States is that you have one leg that carries 120 volts, that would be typically called your hot, and then you have a neutral, and the neutral is almost to ground. It goes the same place. So that typically doesn't carry much voltage. It's basically whatever resistance is in the line, I believe. And then you have the ground. What I'm doing is I'll have 2 hots in this. So each hot relative to ground is only 120 volts. But relative to each other, there's a 240 volt difference, or 230 volt difference in potential, depending on what my wall voltage happens to be. I shouldn't exceed the current capacity of this because this one says for 50 feet, 14 gauge wire, it's rated for 15 amps. Now there's some loss in the VFD, but still on the 1/2 horsepower motor, it says on low voltage, which in this case means 220 volts. The nameplate indicates that it should only run at 2.5 amps for 60 hertz power. This is a dual voltage motor. It's able to run on 208, 220, or 440. 440 is the high voltage mode, and in 440 it would actually only draw 1.3 amps. The 1 horsepower motor down below should be about twice that, and my VFD is rated for 1.5 kilowatts, which should do, I think, 2 horsepower. So it's rated for more power than what this thing will ever draw. You can actually see on the nameplate there. And I believe on the side here, it will say input power is rated up to 14.2 amps on single phase 220, which is still underneath of what my extension cord's rated at. I think we should be fine. It should be well underneath of what the extension cord can do. This whole thing is, I was going to try and make a hack job out of this, but this is a 30 amp plug, and I have a 50 amp outlet, so I can't plug it in without hacking this thing off, and I just decided to do it a little bit more correctly, if you will. So I bought the actual plug here, and then because I can't leave things not hackish, I had to get a see if I can get it. Got another outlet here, and this is actually going to be for ground because 220 service in my garage is the old style, which means that I don't really know which one is which. Pretty sure this would be ground normally, or neutral. In my case it is neutral. I do not have a ground, and then I have leg 1 and leg 2. So I'm not even going to hook up the neutral because it's not required on this. And I'm going to be using leg 1, leg 2, and then pulling ground from another 110 outlet, which does go to the same place. It's super weird, but it will work, and it should be relatively safe. And then at that point, the mill should be able to turn on and operate. And hopefully I can demonstrate its operation, because I do have some bar stock. I have a vise that actually came with the garage, kicking around here somewhere. It's a little bit big for the mill. I have it torn apart right now. But it's an import vise, an older import vise, but it looks pretty decent. They go for like actually decent money, like $200-300 on eBay, apparently. And I also got the T-bolts over here, which are these guys. These are T-bolts. They drop into this tray here, or into the slot, and you get a stud that goes through here, and it holds whatever you want onto the table, like the mill vise. I read when this is a 7/16 T slot. I couldn't figure out exactly how these things were measured. I'm pretty sure it's actually a 1/2 inch, because when I measured this was a 1/2 inch, and this was, I think, I want to say 5/8 of an inch. Can't remember. But you can see it doesn't fall through, so it'll work. But it's a little bit loose. Like, there's some side-to-side play. So if this intersection was actually exactly a 1/2 inch, I think that would be correct. Should have ordered that. I was scared too. So we're gonna make do with this for right now. Clamp some material down. I don't know if the head is trimmed or not, and I don't have any indicators. I need to buy some, but I can at least see how it runs. So I'm gonna go ahead and get to work, cut this extension cord up, wire it up, and see if we can't get it running. Oh, and of course I will also have to program the VFD at some point, because there are a lot of parameters in this thing, and the manual is not exactly in great English, but I should be able to manage, and that will allow me to dial the motor in so it runs quietly and smoothly. Alright, peace out. Hopefully I'll see you guys again with this thing running.